On today's episode, we'll talk about the excitement of filming a great actor's performance from 3 Feet Away, Meatballs 3, Mystic River, 23 years as Clint Eastwood's operator, and of course, changing your life by watching the Academy Awards. Just a little bit of business before we start. There may be a curse word here or there in this episode, so please listen responsibly. As always, our website, theop.io, is up and chock full of tips, tricks, and gooey operator goodness. Make sure to check out The Breakdown, where the best operators in the biz explain shots they have done, The Musings, where we discuss everything from quick tips to larger concepts of storytelling, the answers, the images, and so much more. I may or I may not take a break or two during this episode, but I promise that none of them will be longer than 22 seconds. Finally, if you are enjoying the podcast, please follow us, write a review, share us with your parents, and talk us up around the water cooler with your friends. So grab a beverage, sit back, and enjoy the op. Thanks for listening.
Lock it up, nice and quiet, and let's roll.
Rolling. Victor 30 Echo, take 2.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Mark.
And camera set. And action.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Op, the podcast where we talk about operating and the art of visual storytelling. I am your host, Dave Comides, and I'm really excited today to have a great guest over the internet, great operator, great director, Steve Campanelli. A couple of Steve's credits, I can't say them all because I don't know, I think there were like 112 or something like that on IMDb. 3 billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri. Sully, American Sniper, Gran Torino, $1 Million Baby, Mystic River, The X-Files, the TV show, I believe. Like I said, he has, I think, 112 titles, actually. And by the way, I didn't even mention most of the, I think it's 29 years that he's been the A-camera operator for a guy named Clint Eastwood, who I think some people have heard of. He's won a couple of awards, nominated for Hereafter, J. Edgar, and 3 billboards for the SOC Operator of the Year Award, and was given the Lifetime Achievement Award in 2016. As a director, his movie Indian Horse won awards in 18 festivals around the world, and his most recent movie Drinkwater has won in 12 festivals, including Best Director. He's just an amazing operator, an amazing person, and I'm really excited to have him here. Steve, thank you so much for being with me today.
Hi, Dave. Yeah, it's great. Great to be here, and thank you for having me.
It's funny because we were just saying before we started up that it's so weird. I get to sit down with all these people that I've sort of tangentially know, but this is in 20 minutes, this will probably be more than we've ever actually sat down and spoken with each other.
It's so true. I know, right? It's like we get to see each other at social events and just say hello, but to get the in-depth interview, this is it.
Yeah, with 600 other people too.
Yeah,
so,
true.
So hey, tell me your story. How'd you get to where you are, and what's your path?
All right. How long is this podcast for?
I'll edit it.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Perfect. So I grew up in Canada, in Montreal, and nobody in my family's in the film business at all. In fact, my dad was a gardener, landscaper, very physical, backbreaking work, and I went to work every summer with him, and it was hot and humid and really tough job. And I knew that's not what I wanted to do. And my dad was very encouraging to the same. He says, "Yeah, do it makes you happy." And I went to film school in Concordia University, and I took a film class just for the hell of it, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And somehow I did really well in that class. And it was just all theory, watching movies and writing articles and things like that. And then took another one the year after and sort of had an affinity to it. And I thought, well, maybe there's something here. And then I took another class and I kept doing well. I'm like, oh, maybe there's something here. And it's so weird because, like I said, nobody in my family was. I think possibly my mom influenced me because she grew up in Italy during World War II. And, it was very hard times and the money was hard and, a very big struggle for food. And she used to, couldn't afford to go into the movie theaters, but she was a huge fanatic and she would sneak in as a little girl and sit in the back and watch movies. And she always described it, that love of cinema, of taking away from the issues and the problems that she was dealing with and watching people, on the screen falling in love with this story. So I think maybe that was partially one of the reasons, but I have no idea why I ended up in the film business, but somehow I did okay. I graduated. I got my first job as a camera trainee, and then I moved up right away to a second assistant. Did that for 3 or 4 years. Loved that job. That was back in the day where they didn't hire a lot of people and I was doing 3 cameras all by myself and it was really, really tough. but
Was
I
all this
enjoyed
up
it.
in Canada?
Yes, it was. Yeah, mostly in Montreal and Toronto.
So were you in the union for that, or was that
I
non-union?
was.
Or
Yeah, no, there was. At first, it was, let me think. I think at first it was not union, but then it was. And here in Canada back then, they had a called ACFC, was a smaller union, and then eventually I joined IATSE, of course, and I haven't left since. So it's been a long time.
do you
Yeah.
remember what that show that you were the first camera trainee on was?
Oh yes, I do indeed. It's a classic for all you out there. It was called Meatballs 3.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it had Matthew Broderick in it. That was the biggest thing. But it was in the summer. It was one of the best jobs. It was beautiful summer. It was on a lake. It was on this beautiful dock area, and there was girls in bikinis everywhere, and it was just like, wow, this is what the film is all about. This is
Well,
fantastic.
also it was a franchise, so it was like, oh, I've heard of Meatballs, like it's a thing, right? You know?
Yeah, like Bill Murray was in the very first one, and then the other
Yeah.
ones, I think went downhill from there. But yeah, that was my very first
I love
film.
that.
Yeah, and I learned a lot real quickly. And one of the things for all the camera assistants out there, and for anybody training and getting into the business, the man that hired me, Glenn McPherson, who's a great cinematographer in his own right now, he always instilled upon me. He says, always lock your cases. Every time you take something out, make sure you lock your cases. That's adamant. Okay, good. So one day out of 40 days or whatever, we're getting yelled at because we're about to take the crew photo, and we're on this dock and all that, and he's yelling, "Come on, take crew photo!" And I go running over, take the crew photo, and then okay, everybody back to work. And I go back to work, and there's a one time I forgot to lock the DP's filter case, and as I picked it up, all the filters went into the lake.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I still remember to this day the filters floating down like like going down to the bottom of this silty. It was a very polluted lake too, so I had to get a tetanus shot. I had to dive in. I dived in. I took off my second assistant belt, and I just literally dived into the water. And
did you get them all?
I got them all, and then I spent the next 3 days hair drying the DP's cases, because they were all in individual cases.
Wow, but I bet that never happened again.
That is correct. That was my life lesson for anyone listening. It never happened again. So always lock your cases.
Yeah. Skip the crew photo. Lock the cases.
Yes, exactly.
Wow, boy, of all the things that could go over too, and over into a lake, and I guess maybe it could be worse. They could have fallen over and shattered. So
yes, true. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. So how long did you second AC for?
I would say probably about 3 years or so. And then, the progression is, move up to a focus puller and be a first assistant, and then move your way up to operator. So I did. I was a focus puller in a couple of TV movies back in the day, and I was terrible. I just was not a good focus puller, and I knew it. To me, I think every one of us operators will admit that's like the hardest job on the set. It's just such.
There's no question. And by the way, now even more so, I think.
Oh yeah,
as hard as it was back then, it's a video game now. Like, I don't even understand it.
I don't either. Incredible. I see those green bars and the blocks and the yellow, and I don't know. But somehow they magically do it. And it is a tough job. But anyways, I couldn't do it very well. So I said, oh, it's got to be a better life than this. And I knew I wanted to be an operator. So I just kept, every time I was on a job, I'd say to the DP right away, I said, I want to operate, So then every once in a while, the DP would go, okay, kid, go operate C camera, grab me a nice shot. And I would set it up, and he'd come over and look, and he'd go, oh, it's not bad. Yeah, just tilt down a little, whatever. Okay, great. So I always had, my hand in there trying to look at it. And then the one time I remember is I saw Garrett Brown running up the stairs at the Academy Awards when he won his Academy Award.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the moment I went, that's what I want to do. I want to
really. Did you? But you knew about Steadicam before then?
I did. So that was the big moment of yes, I'm doing it. But what I tell everybody is the movie that inspired me to do Steadicam and wanting to do Steadicam was the original Halloween. And it's so funny because most people say, what's your biggest influence? It's Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick, or, Godfather. And I go, no, with me, it's Halloween. The way he moved that camera through that house and created such amazing tension just with the camera, I went, God, that's what I want to do. I want to be a storyteller with the camera. And that was it. I was just, gobsmacked. It was just so cool.
What year was that?
That would have been what would that have been? So I took the Steadicam. That would have been 83, I think, something like that. I think I took the Steadicam course with Garrett and Ted Churchill and a lot Chris
Wow.
Harhoff and a lot of the big guys in 1986, I believe it was. And I just fell in love. I said, "This is what I want to do the rest of my life." You know.
That was back when it wasn't. You went on the internet and bought a Steadicam.
No, exactly. Yeah.
So, how'd you get into your first rig? Like, how'd you find it?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked because, I was a second assistant at the time and a little bit of focus pulling. And then, I didn't have a lot of money saved. But the cool thing was that I took the course and, we all know Garrett Brown and love him. The guy's a legend. He's such a nice man. He gave me his phone number and I said, look, I want to buy a Steadicam. If you ever hear of one for sale, let me know. I don't know, I can't remember the timeline, but maybe 6 months after the class, he actually called me and he says, hey, there's a Steadicam for sale in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it was used on the film. Remember those two films with the Philip Glass music, Koyaanisqatsi and
Koyaanisqatsi and
yeah,
Powasquatsi or something like that. Yeah,
something
they were
like that. I don't know
these
how to pronounce it. Yeah.
These was it like time lapse movies or
Yes,
something like
just
that, right?
beautiful.
They were really cool, actually. Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful.
stunningly visual, and so Garrett said, well, that film just bought a Steadicam, went around the world for a year. It was cheaper for them to buy a complete outfit and then just resell it and rent it for a year. And they used it like 6 days on the entire movie, so it was pretty much brand new. And I said, I want it. I'm going to buy it, So I flew down to Santa Fe and didn't know the guy. I had a check forget what I paid for it way back then, but I think it was like 50 or 60,000. This is 80.
You're going to say it had to be,
87,
which was more than a lot more than what it seems like today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it was the most ridiculous amount of money. And, the Canadian dollar was really crap. So I had to put the exchange rate in and it was probably like $100,000 investment. So I ate Kraft macaroni and cheese dinners for about 2 years to be able to pay the loan off. And I just practiced. I had a dog. So one of the backstories too is, we'll get to this, I'm sure, but working with Clint, I had a dog named Clint, and that was how much I loved the man. So I would practice my Steadicam by following my dog Clint around the streets of where I lived.
Wait, this was before you ever met Clint Eastwood. This was just as a person
way before.
You were a fan.
Yeah, I was 20-something years
old. I
old.
had no idea. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
that's a whole other level.
That's a whole other story we'll get into.
Yeah.
But that's how I learned Steadicam because, you can follow your friends around, but people are very predictable when I'm going to go left, I'm going to go right. But an animal, you just don't know what they're going to do. So I really honed my skills by following my dog around. So
that's great.
It kind of worked out. Yeah,
and what kind of rig did you what model did you buy back then?
It was the Cinema Products one, the original 3A, I think it was.
3A, okay.
Yeah, with the brick batteries and all that. And that lasted me for a long time. Boy, that thing shot a lot of movies but the great thing about the progression is remember that green screen where you couldn't see anything, but to us it was a miracle that you were carrying a television on your back.
I just recently did a version of the breakdown with Larry McConkey for Carlito's Way. And,
oh wow! Yeah.
And one of the great things was our mutual friend Charles Pappert happened to have because Charles, like a lot of us, collects these things. He happened to have the video tap, and anybody, by the way, listening to this who hasn't seen it should go watch. He had the video tap, and Larry had a thing with his video tap where he would also record sounds, so you can hear Larry cueing and Brian De Palma cueing, and
cool.
It's really amazing. But the incredible thing was, when I was putting the video together, I wanted to sort of give people an idea of how small it was.
Yeah.
So I asked Charles because he just has more information than I said, can you get the dimensions of the monitor? And he did. And I put it out on the desk here, and I had a piece of paper and I drew it out with a marker. And then, of course, the monitor is this big, but the image that you were looking at was a little smaller. And so I put a marker there. And then I looked over at my wall and I was like, that's smaller than a credit card. Like, how did we possibly do any of this? I don't understand it. Like, I look back now with these big monitors that we look at, I don't know how we saw anything.
I don't either. And then when the director's like yelling at you, like, pan over to the lady with the red hat. And I'm like, they're all green. I don't know. They're all green. Red hat. I have no idea what that is.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
it's crazy that anything got done at all, let alone as well as something, some stuff you've done, Larry's done, so many. It's unbelievable.
It is true.
So did you basically buy the rig and you're like, hey, I'm an operator, and now everybody hires me as an operator, or was there a
That's a good question. Well, I did buy the rig, and like I said, it was hard. Like it was just no money, and to take a big loan from the bank. But I worked really hard. I still worked as a second
yeah,
and focus puller whenever I could. In Quebec, you could kind of jump around a little bit. It was a little freer in the union there. So I did that to pay the bills. But I remember I left a movie, the Frank Tidy. British cinematographer. I was his focus puller on the movie, and I said, "I'm going to go take the Steadicam course." And he said, "Well, you're leaving in the middle of my movie." But he said he was very. He said, "Well, can't stop anybody from progressing. Good for you." And then, literally 2 years later, I was his operator and Steadicam operator on a
wow,
movie he was
okay,
doing. So it was really kind of cool, full circle. So I worked really
yeah,
hard to, get good at Steadicam. All the first few jobs I didn't charge because I said I'm not good enough. So just don't pay me. And they were like, "All right, fine."
yeah,
Anyone will take advantage of that. So I did a bunch of
sure,
music videos, which were popular in the day, and some commercials and stuff. And I said, well, when I get good, you'll pay me well. But right now, it's free because I just don't feel I'm qualified or good enough to be, But it helped me get on-set experience, which is, I think, really important for anybody because you can learn
yeah.
so much in theory. You can practice so much at Panavision or Harry or whatever. But, when you get on set, there's all the things that can and will go wrong. So that's the stuff you got to get through.
No question. And so from the point where you started Steadicam, how long was it until you felt like you were a qualified conventional camera operator?
Um, so I guess I don't know if it was inherent in me, but I just felt like I had my parents had a Super 8 movie camera. So when I was a kid, I made Super 8 films with my friends and all that. So, and I didn't know much. I didn't learn. There was no internet, like you said. And so I just kind of picked it up and framed and did shots and, from watching movies and memory. So somehow I think maybe I had a knack for it. So, I'm setting up all these C camera shots and getting feedback from DPs. And they're like, yeah, just a little more headroom here, or this and that. And they would give me tips as I was moving up the ranks as a second and a first. So I had a lot of good tips until I started my very first film. And the very first film I operated was a real crappy film we did in Montreal called The Carpenter. It was like a B, C grade horror movie. And it literally was the first time I used the wheels. And I had not done a lot of people go to Panavision and they put the laser on and spell your name. I'm like, when are you ever going to do that on a set? So I just told the assistant, I said, put the wheels on. They're like, you sure? And I go, yeah, well, I got to learn someday. And there was a shot where an actor's walking down the hallway and I just
Wow.
had to, I screwed it up the first few takes and the director is looking over like, we're going to get this? Yeah, yeah. And then I just threw my brain out. I just said, don't think about it. Just follow the puck. And that was it. I just followed this actor down the hallway and we got a great take. And I'm like, all right.
Wow.
And then every day I just learned more and more and more. So it was just, trial by fire, I guess.
Were you the A camera operator on that show?
I was, yeah. So
Yeah.
they didn't have much of a choice. So
Yeah.
it was a and only operator. So they're like, well, let's let this guy screw
So
up everything.
because it sounds like you just sort of thrust right into it. So it sounds like you didn't do a lot of B camera operating before you got in as an A camera operator.
No, I didn't. I went right to a camera. Actually, I did a lot of just to go back a little bit before that film. I did a lot of Steadicam across the country back in the day. There was only a couple of operators, Bob and Dave
Yeah.
Crone. That was it here in Canada, and myself. So basically, I traveled a lot. I flew all the way out to Vancouver across the country to go do like MacGyver and 21 Jump Street and shows like that back
Okay.
in the day
Yeah.
because Steadicam was such a rage and a new invention that, they didn't have a choice but to fly us all over. So I did a lot of that. So it was B camera / Steadicam. But what I felt was, sure, that was great, and you were like the cowboy that comes into Western town and cleans it up. You come in, you do your shot, and then you take off, and everything's great in the world. But I found that I didn't get to know the crews very well. I didn't get to know the cast. I didn't know what the story was about. So for me, I was longing something, and I said, well, I want to be a part of a whole movie, not just run around and shoot these specialty shots. So
Yeah.
that's why I decided I wanted to combine, a camera and Steadicam. I said, why do you have to pay two people? Why can't you just pay one? So
Yeah.
that's
Well, and
sort
that
of
was
what my brain was. Yeah.
and that was right around the time when that was actually becoming sort of more of a thing, because there was a while where we did just come in and it was like you came and you did the shot, you left, and it was weird because it was like you worked with people but you didn't know them, and you didn't have time to meet them at all because you were you were trying to pull off these shots, and usually they were bigger things and whatever. But
Exactly. Yeah.
how long did it take you till you were comfortable as an A camera operator? Because there's so much more about being an A camera operator than panning and tilting, but it sounds like that you had to learn as well.
Yeah, yeah. It was again trial by fire. Like hopefully they don't notice. I think I'm still fooling them after 35 years or whatever.
We
it is.
all are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So So as we know, there's a lot more to being a camera operator than panning and tilting. You've got to learn all the elements of the psychology of the set, and then figuring out any differences between the DP and the director and how to communicate that. So there's so much more than just a physical act of operating a camera and working with a great dolly grip and a focus puller and your whole camera team, grips and electric. So there's just all these elements on a movie set that all have to blend seamlessly.
Absolutely. So where did you go from there after the Carpenter and your big
my big debut with the wheels. Yeah. So after that, I'm trying to remember what I did after that. I did a bunch of pretty schlocky films, just because that's what we do. You start, you don't get paid much. You get paid very minimal, if anything, but you're getting experience. And that's, my advice to anyone listening is just get the experience, get out there and try stuff and screw stuff up. And, that's the thing you'll learn as an intelligent person, is that you just don't do that again. And you learn what not to do, and you learn what to do and what works. And
hopefully
what
you don't do that again.
Hopefully. Yeah. There are some
or the next time
there.
you do it, you go, God, why did I do that again?
Exactly.
At least you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot to that learning curve of figuring out, how to get yourself to the top of the heap. But I just worked really hard, and I took almost every job that was offered to me just to get the experience and travel. And eventually I did move to Vancouver because it was a big hub there of film. So I just decided, well, instead of flying across the country, I might as well just move there. And then just became, the number one guy, whatever, doing a lot of movies and stuff. And so it was a real pleasure, and it was a great little community there too. The father and son team, Bob and Dave Crone, were just great, and they were the pioneers basically of Steadicam in Canada and all over.
Bob taught me. Bob was the master instructor when I took the course in Calamigos, and he was the nicest man. But I'll tell you, when he taught me, I'm going to guess he was in his 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember he's sort of he's just a very unassuming looking individual, and he's the nicest person in the world, and has this just quiet demeanor to him. And the entire week, because it's a 1 week course, he never put the Steadicam on once. And I remember, because we were staying there, we would go back and we'd have beers at night, and we'd all sort of go, he's probably past his prime and he doesn't want to put it on anymore, and blah, 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 blah. And then when we came time to do what they used to call the Grand Prix shot, which was like the big, you got to do this to pass, which of course you found out you didn't have to do it to pass.
Right.
You just had to try it. He put it on and he did it. And to this day, I've never seen anybody move that elegantly with a Steadicam. Like the hair on the back of my neck, it was I just remember him doing this sort of like ballet walk, and it just floated, and I was absolutely amazed. And what we realized, at least I think, is that he didn't put it on. I mean, look, now that I'm getting close to that, I understand it's 60. I don't want to put it on either. But I think it was more so he wanted us to get used to it before he saw someone who was really good at it or whatever. But he was an amazing guy. He's a totally lovely individual, and changed my life. That's for sure.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, just a wonderful, sweet human being, and we just lost him recently. And he's just a great man. So
and interestingly, his son David's a Steadicam operator, and his grandson's a Steadicam operator too. So there's 3 generations.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yeah.
So you did some work on X-Files, the TV show, right?
I did, and there's a funny story behind that. They shot that here in Vancouver in the 90s. Then they moved it to LA eventually. So this is back in the day before TiVo and all these things. I was a huge X-Files fan. I think it was Friday nights at 9 p.m. I can't remember.
It's a great show.
Yeah. And it was so good and different and dark, and it was so beautifully shot. And I was a massive fan. I mean, just geeked out. Like every Friday night I would watch it religiously. That's why I was probably single. Should have gone out partying on Friday nights, but no.
That's great.
Watching X-Files.
X-Files ruined your social life.
Exactly. But so I kept getting called. They had their team, and they were a great great team. But every once in a while, either somebody's sick or they have a family emergency. They kept calling me, Steve, can you come in and fill in for so and so? And I said, I so want to, but I am such a huge fan. I don't want to see how it's done. Like, that's how crazy I was. I was just like, I don't want to know how it's made. I don't know how the sausage is made. And so for 2 years, I think they kept calling me as a backup. And I said, I just can't, I just don't want to break that beautiful magic. And then I think in season 4, was there four, I think, finally they were like pleading. They said, you have to come. We were stuck. We called everybody. There's nobody available in the States. There's nobody available here. And I went, okay. And I went in and it was great. I met the cast. They were so great. The crew, of course, were just amazing because a lot of them had been on it since day one. Sure. And it was great. I had the best experience, but it did take off that layer of magic because, after I watched when that episode came out, I'm, I remember that shot. I remember doing this. I remember doing this, So I did a couple episodes and it was great and I had a good experience, but it did, from that point on, it did take away the magic for me.
That's funny. So let me ask you a question about that because I was going to ask you later on about this, but I'll hit it now. So, when you go on something that you're that enamored with, is it tough to not like fanboy over the stars and whatnot? I mean, do you have that situation when you go in there, or can you turn it off?
I would say 99% I turn it off. They're just regular people like you and I and everyone out there listening, just regular folk. They're doing their jobs. That's what they are, big movie stars. And, like I've worked with a lot of them and they're just great people, Bradley Cooper and Matt Damon, and all these amazing big actors, Angelina Jolie. They're just, regular folk. But there are a few that I do fanboy on, I guess you'd say. And one of them, I did this movie called The Tooth Fairy with The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, and we had Julie Andrews and a big cast, like a lot of big names, but they were all great people. I love them all. But it was Seth MacFarlane who created Family Guy and all those shows. Sure. So I'm fanboying on him. And I don't usually ask for autographs, but that was the one I did. I said, and I got a picture with him, and I was like, all right, that was pretty cool.
That's cool. That's very cool. So since you've worked with such big names, what advice do you have for younger operators who are coming in on how to deal with actors, like what to do, what not to do, how to approach them? I mean, because there's no hard and fast rules, right? But do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think an actor, when they come to a movie set, expect a level of professionalism. Like, you're not going to run up to them and ask for an autograph or get a picture right away. I think they appreciate that professionalism where they can just be themselves on the set, sit by director chair having a drink of coffee, and maybe you walk by and they strike up a conversation, or you might say, do you need anything? So there is that. You do want to, you appreciate their work, and eventually once you get to know them a little bit, and if you feel that relationship is opening up, then definitely you can talk to them, and they might even ask you about your life and who you are, what's your name, and do you have any kids, and that kind of stuff. And I find most actors do that because they're curious, as we all are. So I would say just to be respectful and to give them their distance when they need it. And you can always see an actor when they're rehearsing or saying their lines over in their head. You don't want to go in there and say, hey, I wanted to ask you a question. So you just have to be aware of what they're going through and, be as professional as you can. But yeah, there is a moment where I think maybe they even expect maybe just someone to just get a little be fanboyish or fangirlish on them,
Yeah, it's no, that's great advice. I've always sort of looked at it as I think for a lot of actors, like ER was this way, but
sure.
Like they'd go out and they'd just get mobbed. And so in a weird way, the set was like their sanctuary where they could just be like, George could just be goofy and stupid, which, he is a lot.
Yeah,
stupid, but he's just a goofball. Right. And, but you wouldn't be judged for whatever it was. And it was, so in a weird way, it was like their way to go like, and just, do that. But have you, one thing I like to ask a lot of people who've done, big stuff like you have you worked with many method actors, and do you have any thoughts for working with method actors? Because that's always a tough one for newer operators when there's an actor who literally is they're in the movie 100% of the time, and yet you still have to interact with them on some level.
Yeah, that's a good question because that is tough because you want to make sure you respect their process because everyone has a different process. I know, like what you're saying, is some actors like to be called by their character name. They're in that character, they stay in that character for almost the entire movie. So yeah, that's a real tough one. I haven't had too many, to be honest. There are a few that just stay in their own little zone, and I just respect that. And at my older stage, I just don't bother them. I just go, it's their process, and I'm not going to screw it up by asking them a question. Or sometimes you have to talk to them, obviously, about hitting the mark and finding the light, and this is what we're doing at this moment. So there is that professional aspect, which I think they're okay with. But yeah, you don't want to ever really take them out of their role if that's what they're doing. But most actors, I tell you, I mean, I've been very fortunate, I guess, but they're just amazing. Like they can be funny and silly and just like you say, crazy, and that's a great word, the sanctuary. And then literally, boom, the director calls action and they're crying and they're being emotional. And it's just like, holy crap. And then the minute they call cut, blah, blah, they're back to finishing the story they were telling. And I go, I love that, to watch someone that can have that much talent to just switch it on and off. And then there's some that need to be on it all the time, which again, I totally respect, and that's part of their process. But I would say with any new operator, anybody new on set, is to definitely give them their space. And just like I was saying earlier about being an operator, you really have to judge the tone on the set and the psychology and the personalities and the egos, because that's a really tricky slope. And especially nowadays too, I think it's even trickier.
No question. I mean, that's I always say reading the room is the number one thing that you have to do, and every room is completely different. And the other thing that I've found is, and the room can shift within 10 minutes if something happens,
Yeah.
and
Oh
you won't
boy.
always know that. Like someone got a call on a phone, and suddenly the producers have pulled the funding or who knows what, and suddenly
Yeah.
everything's completely different.
So true.
Do you still at this point sort of have your eye up in the eyepiece and go, I can't believe I'm watching so and so deliver this amazing performance?
Absolutely, 100%. I still do. After I got to count my years, it's got to be 35 or four
No,
more years.
it's painful.
Yeah, it is painful. Yeah, I keep telling people I started when I was 12. I swear.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time. But yeah, that's a great question. And Dave, I wish everybody out there listening that never goes away. That is
Yeah.
the best feeling in the world. By just literally, the way you described it was so beautiful. Just getting your eye to go to that eyepiece, those last 6 inches or so, and you push your eye in there and you look through and you're seeing so and so on the other side, and then it's quiet and you're hearing them perform, and you feel that's the best thing about being a camera operator, is you feel the performances. And that to me is the most beautiful moment, when the director calls cut and you lift your eye off the eyepiece and look directly at the actor, and they look at you and they go, that was beautiful, right? And you just know it. That moment is just pure magic. Because nowadays, as you know, the director is about 40, 50 feet away in Video Village drinking their cappuccino. And you can see the shot and you hear the performance. But boy, to be 5 feet away from some of the performances that I've seen, it's just so good. And that's what keeps me going every day. I just hope that moment comes. And it usually does. There's always one little moment during a day that you just go, yeah, that was pretty special.
I love how you describe that, because it's exactly the same. It doesn't happen often. I mean, a lot of times
Right.
you see, and even great actors, just they're sort of they're doing the scene and whatever. It depends on the writing and everything else. But every once in a while, when you see that one thing, there's a thing in my mind where I'm like I have the best seat in the house,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
like you said, because you're 5 feet away, you
Yeah.
can literally feel the energy. It's a drug. I mean, there's no question
Yeah.
about it. It's like I don't play golf, but I assume it's like when you connect with a ball. That's why you keep doing it when you
Exactly.
don't most of the time.
Keeps you coming back. I know.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
And
That's a great explanation. So at some point, you apparently met Clint Eastwood,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we got to go back to that. Yeah.
and it sounds like
Yeah,
this was like a childhood dream. Even I
it
mean,
was
you actually
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
actually kind of got to the point that you always wanted to be. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, just, I don't know, dumb luck or just some kind of skill or talent. I have no idea. But I did name my dog Clint when I was a kid, and because I loved him, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all the spaghetti westerns and Dirty Harry, and I would rush to go see his movies every time they came out. And I said to my mom, and all moms are very supportive, and I said, I'm just meet Clint Eastwood someday. And she's like, yeah, sure, that's going to happen.
That's gonna happen.
Trying to crush my little teenage soul,
She's like, you mean the dog? No,
yeah,
I mean
the guy. And
That's great.
It's so funny because I'm like, oh, okay, maybe that's not going to happen. But I don't know. I guess I must have manifested it at some point because I worked very hard. So, anyways, I directed a movie in school. It was our last third year thesis film. It was a 10-minute short with sound. That was the big deal. It's like with sound, you get to have dialogue. And I made this film, which was just images and sound. And the school project, they give you like a $500 grant. Otherwise, you have to pay everything out of your own pocket. And the board said, well, you need dialogue. You can't tell a story with just visuals. And I'm like, what? Of course I can. And they refused the grant. They said, well, we're not giving it to you because we don't think it's going to work out. And so literally my school teacher, she said, you should make this film. I think it's going to be great. And I went, okay. And I made it. And I put in my own money. It was almost like $1,000 of a student money. I was like, this is a lot of money. But anyway, long story short, to getting to the Clint thing is I put it in the film festival in Montreal, and then it ended up winning there. And then I ended up winning the Canadian Student Film Festival Award for Best Picture, for Best Drama, for this little 10-minute short called From a Whisper to a Scream. And
oh, wow.
So it was like getting the rejection of you shouldn't make this film to winning an award was very cool. And because of that, I ended up getting invited to the Montreal World Film Festival, where Clint Eastwood was coming to Montreal. Why would he come to this city? And he was premiering Tightrope, and so it was
so great.
Yeah, it was like such a great movie. So I get invited to this gala. It's a big night. I get to meet my boyhood idol, and this brings me back to what we talked about earlier. I was working as a trainee on my very first film, Meatballs 3, and we were working nights that week, and I didn't go because I said, I am a camera assistant. I'm not leaving my duties. And everybody on the set knew I was a big Clint Eastwood fan. And they were like, are you crazy? Like, you've got to go and meet your idol. He's in the same city as you. And I said, no, I'm here. I was getting paid. I don't even think I was getting paid. Maybe it was $50 a day or something like that. But yeah. I said, no, this is my very first film and I'm dedicated to it. So everyone saw that my professionalism was like, wow, this kid's nuts. He's not going to go meet his boyhood idol, but he's going to stay here working nights for literally no money. And so I literally didn't go to that. And I went, okay, I'll meet him. And I don't know why. I don't know how old I was, 20-something.
Wait, I lost it for a second. You're saying back on Meatballs 3, he was in town and there was somewhere that you could go. Not, this isn't the awards. That was different.
So this was after my student film won, it got to show Canadian talent in the Montreal World Film Festival. Yeah. That's where Clint was going to be to premiere Tightrope.
And you didn't go to it.
I didn't go to it because the same night I was working on Meatballs 3, my very first film.
Oh my gosh, I didn't equate the two. Wow, that's dedication.
Yeah, so I was literally in the same city, maybe a half an hour drive away from meeting my boyhood idol. And I could have been presented because they could have said, oh, this kid just won a film award, but I didn't. And I think somehow in the back of my mind, I said, no, I'm going to meet him someday. I want to make it happen. And, cut to years later, he was doing Unforgiven in Calgary, and I was living in Vancouver. It's only an hour flight. And I said, I should just drop in on the set and go say hi to my boyhood idol. I knew a few of the crew members. And again, I didn't. For some reason, I didn't jump on a plane and I didn't go. And I went, all right, I'm going to just wait. And that was 92. And in 94, I did a movie with Jack Green in China. Called
Jack Green was his cinematographer for years.
His cinematographer,
right?
Exactly, who I looked up to, and he did Bird, he did so many amazing, beautiful films, and so I was in awe of just working with Jack Green alone. And I thought I am one more step closer to meeting my boyhood idol. So I busted my ass so hard in China. We were at 10,000 feet altitude. I was doing a lot of Steadicam, so the air was thin, and I was obviously a lot younger, and just wanted to impress Jack so much.
What movie was that?
It was called The Amazing Panda Adventure. It was directed by Chris Kane, I think. Yes. And so I thought, well, if I bust my ass, maybe Jack will mention me to Clint. And that's exactly what happened. We were in China. This is 94, where, cellular phones were really not the big thing then. So it was satellite phones. And Jack gets a call from Clint, says, hey, we're going to go do Bridges in Madison County, and I need you. And he goes, okay. And then Jack literally says, well, I got this kid Steve Campanelli, who's really good, probably one of the best I've worked with. And Clint was like, okay, or whatever you think, Jack, and Jack gave the greatest compliment. He says, I think he's a better operator than me, meaning Jack. And Jack was an amazing operator.
Yeah.
And I was like, huge compliment. And but because I was Canadian, I didn't have my work visa and all that. And I basically had Clint signed all my paperwork through his lawyers and all that, and got my visa to work in the States. And I'm meeting my boyhood idol in a cornfield in Iowa, and I'm like, Mr. Eastwood, thank you for this, Mr. Eastwood, Mr. I was so nervous, and then he stops me midway, and he just puts his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, "Call me Clint." And that was it. I was like, all right, that's cool. And that was it. Yeah. So my first film was Bridges of Madison County with Meryl Streep and him, and it was crazy.
Boy. Talk about just stepping right into it. That's amazing. Was it because you had such reverence for it, you built this up? Was it was it tough working with him at first, just because you wanted everything to be perfect? And
yeah, it's hard. They always say never meet your idols, whatever, because they usually disappoint. But one of the greatest things Sean Penn says about Clint after Mystic River was Clint Eastwood's the only American idol that doesn't disappoint. And it's so true, because he surpasses what you think of him. Like he's a very private guy, and I didn't know much about him. I thought, well, suppose he's a screaming and a yelling director, I'm going to be so disappointed. He's the complete opposite. He empowers the entire crew. He asks for your opinion. He's encouraging. And Jack even said, don't be shy. Add a shot for Clint. He will totally take it if it's a good idea. And then he did. I was so nervous at first and just very awkward. But Clint just gives you the empowerment on the set to do your job and do it well. And I felt right at home from the very first film.
What a dream scenario. And so you've been a Z camera operator for 29 years, is that right?
29 years, and we were right in the middle of a movie when the strike happened, so we have to go back to finish that in Savannah. It's called Juror Number 2, a really good script and a really great story. So,
and I may be wrong, but didn't he say this was going to be his last film as a director?
Well, people have said that. He still doesn't. Okay. He still doesn't say that. He's 93. He's still hanging in there. God bless him.
That's great.
And I don't know. He's still, and I think it's this great saying that he has is "Don't let the old man in," which is so true, because as his body is aging, and all our bodies are aging, but inside we're all still 20 years old, 25 years old. And that's what when I look at older people now, I look at them, I go, yeah, they're just young inside. We all are. We don't want to be older. We don't want to admit our bodies are getting older. And I'm still running around like an idiot with the Steadicam on and going upstairs backwards and all this stuff. And I still love it, and I still able to do it, which is a blessing,
Absolutely. So I got to imagine, though, that when you're working, have you missed any of his movies in 29 years?
It's been amazing, Dave. I've done other movies, obviously, as we know, but I've never missed one of his movies.
That is incredible.
Missed it. The only time I had to leave early on a movie was American Sniper, because we were in Morocco, and I was getting my very, very first film to direct, and it was in South Africa. So I was on the same continent. And so literally I left American Sniper in Morocco about halfway through the movie, and I flew down to Morocco to direct my first movie, and I had to go tell Clint that I was leaving after this would have been 21 years, I guess, something like that. And it was like this Alfred Hitchcock thing. I kept seeing the hallway getting longer and longer, the dolly zoom, and I saw his room at the end. I had to knock on the room, and I had to go in and tell him, and I was frightened and I was freaked out that I was never going to be invited back after all these years. And there's this great moment where he's showing me, he went to the souk market and he bought all these knives, these beautiful ornate knives, and he's pulling them out of the sheath, and I'm imagining the sound designer going, shing, like the knives coming out of there. And he's showing me these massive knives, and all I'm thinking about is I got to tell him I'm leaving, and I'm going to be, Hollywood cameraman stabbed by Clint Eastwood in Morocco.
And I'm going to go out on a limb and say he was completely supportive of your journey, and probably even more so than you thought.
100%. He was just like, I was so nervous and scared. And he just said, I never stop anybody from advancing themselves. You're going to be a great director. He says, I figured you must have learned a lot from me. And I go, I sure have, boss. So
it's so great.
It was a really great moment.
Great. And did you solicit or did he give you advice on directing?
He did. He gave me 4 points. He said, get a great script. He says, get a great cast, get a great crew. And then the last thing he paused, he goes, and get a good caterer. And that was it. Those are his directing notes.
Actually, the fourth one might be the most important one in the
Yeah,
long run.
I think so. I don't think they were in numerical order, but yeah, they were.
Yeah.
That was his advice.
It's so funny because he's obviously right about all those, but then there's that part of you that goes, "Yeah, I'm not Clint Eastwood, so I'd love to do all those things, but I may not be able to."
Yeah, exactly. It's hard. I don't know how we do it.
And you guys, from what I've heard, like throughout the business, there's sort of this rumor. I guess this is rumor that it's all the same crew. That like it's just you show up and it's all the same people, and you've all been with him forever. Is that accurate?
Pretty accurate. Unfortunately, because that is true, we've lost a few. You know, they've been around forever, so there's some new blood in there now. But and it's great. But it's still like a family. It's very supportive. It's very quiet. The set is so quiet. It's unbelievably well run. There's no confusion. There's no chaos. There's no yelling and screaming. He doesn't like loud sounds, so we keep the volume down. But somehow things get done. It's unbelievable. But there is that second hand where everyone just knows each other quite well. I've been very fortunate to have really great camera teams beside me through the whole thing, because a lot of times we shoot the rehearsal, which they say is really not a rehearsal if you're shooting it, but we do that a lot, and so I got to trust my focus puller, I got to trust my dolly grip. So we do a lot of Steadicam on his movies because he doesn't really like to be tethered to the dolly, and we don't put a lot of marks down. We give lighting just general, ideas, try and hit this area, and I'll try and obviously make a nice frame and composition out of it. But it's a really great way of working. Like the actors feel very free to do what they want to do, and us in the camera department, we are also very free. And every once in a while, of course, the lighting doesn't work out or something. We have to do another take, but very rarely do we do more than one or two takes.
Yeah. And his films, to me, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I actually mean it in a good way, they're very simple as far as the process is concerned. It's just, to me, it's just, how do you tell this story more simply? I don't know. Is that by accident? Is that by choice? Is that something you're aware of?
I think it's by choice, and maybe by accident, because he's very frugal. He likes to make his films under budget, under schedule always, so he's very frugal that way. So he doesn't want to spend a lot of time doing all these big fancy shots and all that. That'll take hours to light, and we got to get big cranes in there and all that. But the one thing he says to me, he says, "Don't let the camera dictate the story, let the story dictate the camera." So that's the one thing I learned as a director, and I think a lot of directors can learn that out there. It's really important not to get the camera in the way of a good story. Just let it happen in front of you. And there's always those cool, great shots that I love and we all love, and they go, "How did they do that?" But then I find if you're watching that shot, you're not really watching the story as well as you should be.
There are times where I've been doing Steadicam shots where sort of halfway through setting it up, I'm sort of like, I think this is about the shot. I don't think this is about, like, we should have cut all the way back down that hallway and then done a reverse. Like, we're missing stuff here. And I think people do get, well, it's not as much as it used to be. I mean, when in the heyday, right, it was just like, let's just make it longer and longer and longer. And it wasn't always serving the story. But I love that quote. That's fantastic. I have to ask you one thing. At what point did you share with him that you skipped meeting him for the award, and what was his reaction?
I think honestly I don't remember exactly, but I think it was like he's so funny, and he has so many quick lines, and he goes, I think he said like something like, "I hope I was worth the wait." It's just like
that delivers. That's great.
It's just so good, like because I told him I named my dog after him, and he looked at me like, "That was a good honor. Okay, cool." And then I told him that I waited like, I guess that would have been over 10, 12 years. So I actually finally met him from that one moment. So, it's just perseverance. And I just turned out to be a manifestation. I guess I said, I'm going to work with Clint Eastwood someday. Actually, I said I wanted to meet him, just get an autograph. So on Bridges, I got a picture with him. I got him to sign my slate. I got him to, what else? Just a few things, pictures and autographs. And then I said, okay, pleasure to meet you. See you, done. My life can go on. I'll go finish doing other people's movies. And then year after year, I just kept getting a call back. And, 29 years later, it's still happening.
You passed the audition.
Yeah, exactly. I guess he hasn't caught on yet. Yeah.
I'll tell you a story. I'm guessing that this was the year that you got the Lifetime Achievement Award at the SOC, because I was talking to Garrett Brown, and at one point I said to him, is it weird being Garrett Brown? Like just
Right.
because, he's such a big name and this and that and the other. And he said, yeah, he said, it's weird. And there's also good stuff. And I said, like what? And he said, well, I was at the SOC Awards, and I think it was probably 2016.
Yeah.
He said I was getting something or other, and I went into the bathroom, and I go to the urinal, and Clint Eastwood standing next to me. And I remember thinking, like, oh, it's Clint Eastwood, but not thinking much of it. And he turned to me and he said, nice speech. And I said, thanks. And that was all we said to each other.
That's cool.
I thought that was pretty
awesome.
funny. Like, I had this image of the two of them at the urinals talking about.
That's so great.
these two great
two legends. Exactly.
That's amazing. So tell me about working with. So, have you been with the same dolly grip then for a long, long time? I mean,
We've had a few over the years. Back in the day, they've all retired. Because Charlie Saldana was our key grip, who was just an amazing man and wonderful human being. He had a lot of great dolly grips. But over the last few years, amazing. Greg Brooks has been with us. Everyone calls him Brooksy. Amazing.
Yeah.
And lately, we've had just a couple of different ones, and they've all been great. But Brooksy was the longest, I guess, with me. And then Focus Pullers, I had Bill Coe for 25 years, I guess. We did so many of the movies. And now I have Jim Apted, who's wonderful, and his team is always great. So, and like we were saying earlier, Clint likes to surround himself with familiar faces. So he's doesn't want to have to learn new people and how they work,
So my question for you is, when you're doing this many films with someone like that, and it's the same crew and it's over and over, when you've got a dolly grip, you walk in and there's a shorthand that already exists. Like you guys don't even have to talk. I'm sure. I mean, you talk, I'm sure, but it's not. He knows what you want. You know what he wants, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you go off and you do another movie and you jump on a movie and it's a dolly grip that you have not, you don't know, which I'm sure doesn't always happen at this point, but occasionally it does happen. Someone that you don't know, and I'm thinking more for, newer operators. What do you do to like start that relationship? Because you have to figure out what they know and what they don't know and how good they are at this. And just like they're probably doing with you. You have any suggestions for that, or anything that works for you?
I think like any good relationship in a marriage, or it's just good communication, which you were alluding at, I think, is just to get to know that person. And if it's possible, sometimes it's not, but if you guys can go out earlier in the day or the day before, or, just go out and have a beer, or if you don't drink, just have a coffee and just get to know each other in terms of what you like and what you don't like. Like, as us operators, we like certain things a certain way, and you just tell the dolly grip that, and then they'll go, okay, you like that. Some guys like it faster, slower, whatever. But, it all depends. And then vice versa. Like I always ask the dolly grip, what do you prefer? Which dolly? I don't personally care. That's your tool. I need to go up and down and in and out. And as long as that works, I'm happy. So I always give the dolly grip their choice on what dolly they want to use. I don't usually get involved in that. But I think it's just communication and getting, like you said, getting the feel for each other. Like, and you give feedback right away. Like if they rise too quickly and the camera's shaking, just say, okay, just a little softer at the beginning and just feather out the ending. And so it's just all of that communication. But it is so important to have somebody that you know and trust and knows you. And then when you can use the overkeeper or the slider, but you have a good dolly grip when you don't, you just lock that thing and he or she will definitely slide it into a perfect over the shoulder and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
because I think at our points, we tend to get to work with people we know, but when you're younger, you just, and especially if you're on B camera, you just get put with someone and you have to sort of like jump right in the pool.
Yeah, you really do. I think you have to show that what you want, because you're the eye that's behind the camera, and they might think they've done something great, but you need to give them that feedback and just go, yeah, it just was a little rough at the end, just smooth out was it? I didn't know that, because sometimes they don't feel it, but then the next take they smooth it out and you go, there it is, that was perfect. So as long as you can give them the feedback, like not only when it's negative, but also when it's positive, so they know, okay, that's the way we like it. So I
also like the fact that you mentioned, which I don't think I've heard anybody mention before, is that you don't get involved, because I don't either, mainly because I don't know, but you don't get involved in the choice of the dolly,
right?
Because it's funny, because I have heard before where operators have had preferences, and I'm sort of like,
sure.
I mean, I don't want to be on a small Pee-wee if I don't have to, because I'm just too big for it. But whatever. Right. Sometimes you have to be on it anyway.
Yeah.
But it's more like that's their piece of equipment, and there's I want to give them the respect to go, this is the piece of equipment I need to do the job, and it's sort of like, okay, as long as you can do the job, that's what I care about, not what you need to do it. But I think a lot of it also has to do, and I think you sort of hit on this, is with the feedback and investing them in the shot and pointing out that, there's three of us who are doing the shot. There's me, you, and the focus puller. And it's
Right.
not just me doing the shot and you're assisting me, and I think
Exactly.
I know in my career, I think when I was younger, I might have fallen into that trap a couple of times where it's like, no, I'm at the top of this pyramid and you guys are assisting me, which I think is natural, especially when you're probably afraid that you don't know what you're doing.
That's true.
But once you get used to it, I think it becomes much more of a no, we're all doing the exact same thing, and that's where it gets interesting to me.
Absolutely, it's a team effort. Like they are the unsung heroes that make you look good, because everyone does look at the operator. Like, was that sharp? Was it good? The shot was great, and then it's all the people around you that made that shot that great because they all seamlessly work together. All three of you or four of you, yeah. So that to me is the joy of getting either three perfect strangers to get together and make this amazing shot, or a team you've worked with for many years that just know each other, and you have a ridiculous amount of fun. Especially when you're on the headsets, and you can also talk and say stupid crap to each other. It's great.
What do you do during rehearsals? Do you walk around and sort of try to figure out what the shots are, or do you just watch, or what do you do?
Yeah, I try and always look for good angles and good. Like, I'm trying to always think the way Clint thinks is just not overcomplicated. So I try and find the right angle to get our master, and then figure out the easiest way to get coverage without getting blocked into a corner. And that's something I learned, I didn't know a long time ago. And I would put the camera in a place, and then we'd shoot it, and then I'd go, oh shit, now we're screwed, and I got to be on this side of the line, and now there's a bookcase there that's not going to be able to move, and so now as experience as for any young operators out there, it's like you just remember your ramifications and try and think 3 or 4 shots ahead of what you're doing right now, because you're going to get screwed at some point. And if you're okay with crossing the line, that's great, and I'm okay with that sometimes, and I always check with the directors, of course, but definitely you got to make sure you're thinking 2 or 3 shots ahead. So I'm always looking at that in a rehearsal, and then I'll whisper to the director or the DP and say, if he or she didn't do that little reverse right then, we can get all that in one, and then we just come back for this. And they go, oh yeah. And they'll just go and mention to the actor, like they'll say, hey, is it okay if you don't do that little turn at the end? Does that make it big? And they'll go, oh no, that's fine. I just did it just to have some movement or something. So, there's always compromise. There's always ideas that get thrown around, and, hopefully the best idea wins.
It's funny that you mentioned the thing about furniture, because my dolly grip that been working with for a while, Steve Hubble, is great about, I'm playing the chess, but he'll sort of play the more physical chess, and he'll be like, all right, I know we're coming around here, but I'm going to get screwed by that coffee table.
Right, exactly.
I didn't even think about the coffee table. So it's great because he's the extra set of eyes for me on that. No question about it.
Very
but
important.
I think you're right. And you think like an editor, right? You're sort of trying to think, like, where's the cut going to be, and what do we need, and whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you do when you're like, if you're doing a steady cam shot or even a dolly shot, and in the middle that something was wrong, you saw off the set, or something not just, I didn't like the way I panned, but something bigger, and the shot ends and everybody's clapping and excited and ready to move on. How do you handle that?
Well, that's a good question. That's the old puppy dog with its tail between its legs, where everyone's clapping and high-fiving at Video Village, and you got to walk in and go, yeah, did you see that middle part where I cut the C-stand and the light in the ceiling? And they're like, what? No, we didn't see that. And then hopefully you have someone that knows what they're doing back there, and they go, I'm not going to use that part. We're fine. It's good. The rest of the shot's amazing. Fantastic. I got to cover it anyway. So unless it's a oneer, of course, but there is that moment where you really have to do the walk of shame and just tell everybody, I don't know if you saw that, but there was something in the shot that's not supposed to be there. Now, it should never be an excuse, but nowadays we're a little blessed with CGI, where you could get rid of something. If it was a magical one, it'll never happen again shot, yes, you can use that as a crutch, I'd say. But we try not to, as operators, to ever have that as an excuse. We see it first, we should see it right in there and make sure we got it all. And sometimes you just can't catch everything. You might miss a T mark on the floor that you just never saw before, and you're like, oh crap. So you got to bring that up to somebody's attention, and they'll decide whether to get rid of it later or tighten up the shot or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny you say but I'll never use that part of the shot. And I'll always go, okay, and I'm walking away, and I'm like, that's going to be in the movie. Because I've been there too many times. Because right now, I think you are absolutely being completely honest. But 6 months from now, after 12 people have gone through this, it always amazes me. But yeah, it's that interesting again, for younger operators, especially a B camera operator, it's that hard thing of you want to get that information in right away before everybody moves, starts like tearing down the set. But you
Exactly.
also don't want to be the bad guy. But that's one of those hard knocks that you have to learn, right?
Yeah, that's a tough
Yeah.
one. It's never the delivery of that message is never good, but you got to do it as part of your job.
Yeah, you're not going to get around it. Have you
No.
ever been in a situation? I'm assuming not with Clint because he's got the full crew, but on somewhere else where the director and the DP are not seeing eye to eye, and you're in the middle of it.
Yes, I've one
You don't
film.
have to use names.
I'm not gonna use the name, but
Yeah.
I was so excited. It was about it's 8-9 years ago, I guess. I was so excited because it was a female director and a female DP, and I'm like, this is going to be great. I love that energy. I love the female energy on set. It's going to be great. It was my first time where I'd worked with female directors, but not a female DP. And I said, this is going to be great. And it started out first week or so, everything was great and wonderful, and I'm communicating between the both of them. And I don't know what happened in week 2 or 3, but boy, it just went downhill. They hated each other. They were fighting like cats and dogs, and they would not even talk to each other and screaming and yelling matches. So I'm in the middle between the two, and the DP is telling me, she goes, go tell that so-and-so that I'm going to be another 20 minutes of lighting. And I go, okay. And I go over and I say, she needs another 20 minutes of lighting. Why does she have to relight everything? Why does it do? I'm like, oh, geez. And I go back, she doesn't want to wait 20 minutes. Well, that, she's going to have to, it was this whole back and forth. And I'm like, oh yeah, it was a nightmare. So the rest of the movie was like that. And it was really tough because I was caught in the middle. And that's a great note though, for being a camera operator, is you do have to find that perfect balance of keeping the both of them away from each other, but also communicating what each other wants. Because, you're still telling a story, you're spending millions of dollars, and you're responsible to the studio and all that. So it's, another big responsibility gets on an operator's shoulder. Again, like you said earlier, it's not just panning and tilting. You got to keep the story going and keep the show alive. And we managed to make it through the whole movie just by, I guess, me being the buffer between the two of them. And I think they kissed and made up at the end. I don't know whatever happened, but they haven't worked together since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because it is that thing of like, I think, yeah, you sort of go, oh, okay, so I guess this is my job on this movie.
Yes.
And that job changes from movie to movie because of the relationships, right? It's like
absolutely it does.
Morphing.
Sometimes it's just so silky smooth and everyone's on the right table. And Martin McDonough, I did 7 Psychopaths with, and 3 Billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri. And Ben Davis is his DP. He was just a wonderful human being and just such a talented cinematographer. And so they have a wonderful relationship between the two of them. And the beauty of that is Martin is just very visual, but also it's his words. He's written the dialogue. He loves working with the actors, and he kind of lets Ben and I go and do the visual aspect of the movie, although he does, have final say. But it's a great relationship where he just trusts us completely. We're going to give him some good images, and he's going to work with the dialogue and the actors, and it just works out so great. It's such a fun experience working with them.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, really
I wanted to ask you about Mystic River, because that's a fantastic movie. I mean, that was such an unbelievable movie. What was that experience like?
That's one of my favorite films. People always ask me, what's your favorite Clint Eastwood movie? And, even though The $1 Million Baby won the Oscar, Mystic River is my number one, I always say. It's just such a beautiful film. 2 Oscar-winning performances in there. It was magical. And it still gets to me. And the one thing I always remember is that scene on the porch with Tim Robbins and Sean Penn, where he's sitting in the back and everyone's partying inside, and Sean Penn cries for the first time. And he says, Davey, you're crying. And he says, that we shot, we had a Pee-wee doll. It was a balcony, maybe about 3 feet wide, 2 chairs. There was nothing else there. It was a real balcony. And we had the Pee-wee on a track. And Clint says, we're shooting the rehearsal. I don't know what's going to happen. All right. And so that's the moment. I had a 2-shot. And they start acting, and then I don't know what we're doing. And I cue the dolly grip with my finger. I said, let's start moving in. And we just start pushing and pushing and push. And we end up in this beautiful close-up of Sean Penn, who just, has this tear drop at the right moment. And it was the most beautiful, magical thing I'll ever remember. And it just happened literally on the rehearsal. And then we turned around and did Tim Robbins' side. So we shot that whole emotional scene in like 20 minutes or something. It was crazy.
So that was he did the one take, and
Yeah.
he knew he had it, and that was it.
Yeah, it was amazing. We do
That's
that a
incredible
lot.
because that's an amazing performance. It's an amazing shot. It's everything. And to know that you didn't really, I mean, obviously you put down a piece of track, so you had some thought of it, but still.
Right. Like, I read the scene and I knew it was going to be very emotional. I said, we're definitely going to need to do a pushing on this one for sure. And so, and when we did it, it was just like, oh, this worked out great, So
that's incredible.
That was a great experience, that movie. And that's one of those things I mentioned earlier where an actor, Sean was more into his role, like he stayed within himself, but Tim Robbins was just like, he's very tall, 6'4" or 500, and just a wonderful, fun guy. But the minute he turned into his character, he'd slump over, he'd hunch over, and he would have a huge different demeanor. And then when he called cut, he was just back to being himself. And those are the really cool moments where you just go, that's pretty neat how he can turn it on and off.
Wow, that's I spent about half a day in the back seat of a Lincoln Continental with him. It was just the two of us because they were resetting and whatever. And we talked like most of the day. And he's a fascinating guy. He's a total goofball. He's like really he's a really fun guy. But that's what I was wondering was, I mean, was it tough to shoot Mystic River? Because that's a dark movie.
Yeah, it was very dark. We read the script, and at that point, I didn't have any kids. I actually, the year after my daughter was born, so it was, as a parent, I would have been even more devastated, I think. Yeah. But it was very tough. Yeah, we all knew it was going to be tough. And I think out of all the films we've done, we always were very lighthearted and we laugh a lot. I think that was one of the films that we all, we just calmed down a little bit because we knew we were making something very serious and very heavy. And it just felt it. You could just feel the weight of Boston by being there and as being a character in the movie. And Clint's a big fan of shooting real locations. We very rarely shoot on set. So it's always the set kind of dictates our blocking and framing because we can't move a wall. I got to figure out how to get a wide shot in this room that doesn't have a lot of room in it, So it's moments like that where the building becomes part of the character too, and that dictates the story too.
Do you enjoy that aspect of having to go, I can't control this, I have to work within it? Does that help you?
I do like that, actually. Yeah, you have to become very creative. Like you were saying earlier with low budget stuff, you just got to be more creative because you don't have all the fancy tools. But on this, you have all the fancy tools, but you just can't fit them in the set. So you've got to figure, maybe you got to put a slider over the kitchen sink. You do a little move here. I got to take all this stuff off so I can just lean up against the counter. And, I'm still a big eyepiece guy, so I always like to look through the eyepiece if I can, or, I'll use a monitor if I have to. But it's always that. And it'll dictate the shots. And when you watch the movie, you as an audience member, you don't know that I couldn't take that wall out and I couldn't do this and that, So it's just, you're watching a great story. And that's what Clint's philosophy is. Like, I don't want to spend 2 hours or an hour and a half taking that wall out and trying to figure it out. And then the actors don't feel the set anymore. They're feeling a big empty space with a bunch of crew members on their phones, So he loves that the set also helps the performances too. And, by having, I guess, how many, 4, I think, Oscar-winning performances on his movies that I've shot. And it's insane because he doesn't give them a lot of feedback. He just gives them a lot of comfort. And like you said earlier, Sanctuary, he just gives them a zone where they can perform and they just do miraculous work under his guidance. Wow. Yeah.
So how are you as a director with your operators?
That's a good question. It's always nerve-wracking. It's always nerve-wracking for the operators, I think. One guy even said to me he was very nervous, and I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, "You okay?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm just a little nervous." Why are you nervous? And he turns to me and he goes, "Have you seen your resume?"
So was this a friend of yours, or this was somebody who the DP?
No, somebody I hired, and it was just so funny. And I was just like, "Just don't worry about it. You're doing great." And but no, I definitely, again, comes from Clint and a lot of good directors I've worked with. You just got to empower your team and get the best people possible to make you look good. And I've been very lucky in all my films. I've had really great operators and DPs. And they just rise to the challenge. And I do grab the camera once in a while because I just love it. And I don't do it for, that person can't do the job. And they know that. I just going to have fun. This is a cool shot. And I go, "Oh, yeah, sure. You're the director, So, or sometimes I will operate in a close-up. So I can be really intimate with the actor and I can literally take my eye off the eyepiece and look them straight in the eye 4 feet away and give them a note. and whisper it without, being obtrusive, and just go, yeah, just do that again, a little softer. And we keep rolling, and I'm right there. I don't have to run back to Video Village. So
Sure.
I'll do that occasionally on very emotional moments. I will, like on Indian Horse, I did that because I had a lot of kids that were non-actors. So I wanted to make sure that they saw one person most of the time. So, yeah.
Wow.
But it's hard to give up though, because it's so much fun, and but it is. I do enjoy directing, and I love watching the whole process happen in front of me.
Do you ever find that if you can't quite figure out how something should play, that if you can pick up the camera, there's something takes over that helps you with that process?
Yes, that happens too. Yeah, sometimes I can't. I mean, that's the job of a director, is hopefully explaining your shot and your vision to an operator. So sometimes I've worked with, I'm sure we all have worked with directors that literally don't have that knowledge and can't explain it, and it's up to you to figure it out somehow.
Yeah.
But sometimes, I mean, I think I'm pretty good at that, but sometimes I am at a loss for words. And so I do pick up the camera and I said, this is what I want to do exactly at this moment. You got to catch this through here. And then, okay, great. And then they'll do it. Or if they don't get it quite right, then I just say, do you mind if I do it? It's just that one little moment is so important to me. Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead. So, you never want to ruin or take away anybody's job, but sometimes they get the idea that, yeah, you just got to grab it yourself.
Yeah, the reason that I ask is when I directed ER, Charles Pappert was my operator. And
wow, great.
He was not only so great, but so great to have, because he's a friend of mine. And there were times where he'd just walk up to me and be like, "You're doing fine. Don't worry." Like
that's
he was like my therapist on it. But there was this one scene that I could see in my head, and it was going to be one Steadicam shot, and I said to him ahead of time, you can totally say no to this, and I'm honestly fine if you do. I said, but I don't think I can, I don't think I'm mature enough to be able to tell you the beats that I'm looking for. And I don't want to put that on you. Would you mind if I threw the Steadicam on and did this shot? And
that's cool.
He said, no, please go for it. And he totally understood. And I said, it's not about you. And he said, I know it's not about me. It's that you can't get out of here. And I went in and I did it. And he was great, because he watched the monitor and he was like, listen, when you're coming around here, I think you can grab that over there. And he helped me finesse it. But I said, I was so appreciative of him for understanding that. And I explained to everybody else why I was doing it, that it was my failing, not his.
Right.
But it was the only way I could do it, because like, there's that weird thing of like, I've never directed before, so I'm still figuring that out. But when I put the Steadicam on, I'm like, oh, I know this.
Yeah,
this
exactly,
is easy.
Yeah.
And then I'm just doing like what you said. I'm working for the director who doesn't know what the hell he's doing, and I'm making something nice. But it was an interesting thing that I was like, I think this is the only way I'm going to be able to get exactly what I want, because I can't explain it. I don't know how to tell you what it is.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great story. I love that. Wow, you were in definitely good hands.
Literally, I can tell you there was one point where he knew that I was kind of I had this idea, for the scene, and I'm sure you've been here as a director, and you show up and then the actors do it, and it's just completely different than you had in mind, and it's not going that way. And he could tell, and he came over and he goes, why don't I just start putting some track down over there, because I think our master's going to be over there. And I was like, yeah. And he knew that was like going to take the pressure off me, and I could figure it out. So
that's great.
Yeah,
that's good.
He's an amazing filmmaker.
Yeah, exactly.
An operator, and now DP and everything else.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really fantastic. I can't thank you enough for all this. It's such a fascinating story, and hearing about your work with Clint and your career, and now your career as a director and everything. I'll leave you with a question I leave pretty much everybody now, which is simply, younger operators or someone getting into the film industry, or even younger Steve Campanelli, knowing what you know now, what do you wish you knew, or what advice can you give to them on how to succeed?
Oh boy, that's a good heavy question. Let's see. I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but it's don't be afraid to fail. That's one of the biggest advice I could give, is you've just got to get out there and try. And I think too many people nowadays are just too afraid to fail, or, screw up, whatever. But, to this day, I still screw things up. And it's just like, that's part of the job, and it's part of who you are. We're humans. We're not perfect. It's like, just get out there and try. And I think today's, what's the right word? Not kids, but today's young filmmakers have so many opportunities that we didn't have. And like an iPhone can shoot 4K raw, like it's amazing. Go and shoot stuff. Go and make your content. Get it out there, and you've got so many venues to show it on, and YouTube and all that. We didn't have that. We just had to go to work every day and show how we were. But I think it's just get on a set, ask questions, don't be afraid. Try and find a mentor. Try and find someone that'll take you under their wing. Communication. Those are all the things I wish I had done more of when I was first starting out. I might have, gone up the ladder sooner, but I worked my way up, and I wouldn't change a thing. But I think that's the thing, is don't be afraid to make mistakes and to be who you are. And part of it is, as we all know, is personality. People don't want to be around you 12 hours a day if you're being a dick. So just be enjoyable to be around and have fun and be your true self, so people get to know you, and you don't come to work and then put on some different persona and then you go home and you're a different person. Just be who you are. And that, I think, is the friendships that I've had to this day are the people that I've enjoyed hanging out with on the set and off the set. So I think that's my best advice.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We'll be back soon with another great episode. Don't forget to check us out on theop.io for all sorts of information on operating and storytelling. So thanks for listening, and have a great day.